Hi.
What's up?
Just had crazy last couple of weeks trying to figure out what life is.
I guess to start, do you want to just like give an overview of like who you are and just kind of like your background in coffee, how you got to like where you are now?
Yeah. Well, back in the 90s, I was a barista. That doesn't count though in my career overall. I started with Green Mountain Coffee Roasters back in, it was about 16 years ago now. And they were like a regional, pretty big regional roaster. And I worked with them through all kinds of roles, but production, processing 1,000 pounds of coffee at a time, running it through grinders and stuff.
No.
And went into quality and training people. And so I got to learn how to like really train adults. They invested a ton of time and resources into their employees. So I got to learn all about like adult learning theory and all of that stuff. Also got to become a Q grader. So I did that about 15 years ago, 14 maybe, 13, I don't know. Uh, I got a chance to start volunteering while I was working there. I was actually a sensory specialist at the time. So I just tasted thousands of K cups a day. Gosh, yeah, Green Mountain Coffee Roasters bought Keurig, and that became a whole new big business. I remember starting working with a Keurig and having people be like, "What's a Keurig?" back home in Michigan or anywhere in the United States that wasn't, Vermont. I got to work with that brand as they grew and became this national, maybe even internationally recognized brand. They ended up buying Dr. Pepper actually, which was
Yeah,
crazy.
I saw that. It's crazy.
Um, so I mean, that's where I got a lot of my coffee experience working with them in different roles in quality and sensory. I got to volunteer with the SCAA, the Specialty Coffee Association of America, because it used to be a separate thing back then. And I volunteered to teach some classes, and the education manager asked me to come on as the chair, the founding chair for the coffee sensory pathway, is what they used to call it. And so all of that sensory education that exists now under the SCA, I helped build the original program, which feels pretty cool. I've been a Brewers Cup national judge, head judge, and also judge for the national stage for SIGs, Coffee and Good Spirits. Yeah, I became a Q instructor about 5 years ago. I've been an SCA AST authorized SCA trainer, is what that is. I've been one of those probably for 12 years, teaching all the different SCA classes, brewing, barista, roasting, green, and sensory. Yeah, I ended up leaving corporate world. I went into eggs for a year. It was really not good. And then for the last 8 years, I've just been traveling around teaching people about coffee, certifying through the SCA and also through CQI with the Q Grader program. I've probably worked with over 1,000 people in at least 7 or 8 different countries. So it's been really cool, really big adventure. I do have a lot of experience with both the SCA and CQI as an organization, so I'll be able to answer at least some of the questions that you had.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm sure we won't cover every single one of them. There's just like, I guess a couple main ones that I wanted to go over. Again, like kind of in keeping with the theme of just giving a background of things. Obviously, SCA stands for Specialty Coffee Association and CQI is Coffee Quality Institute. But what's like the main difference between the two? What do they both focus on more than the other?
So the SCA's biggest like revenue source is their events. So the
Okay.
World of Coffee event and what we used to call the Expo in the US, which is now going to be called also World of Coffee event. They started doing those in Asia and they have them in Europe and they're doing them in the US and I think even down in Panama they'll be doing one for the first time in Central America. So that's like the biggest thing for the SCA. And then the second part is their education. And their education is really quite different than CQI's education program. The SCA's education program involves instructors who have gone through the professional level of a module, so say like sensory. So 1-day class for foundation, 2-day class for intermediate, 3-day class for professional. And then once they get to that point, they can apply to be an AST or an approved SCA trainer. The SCA currently gives those, I think it's like probably 4 online meetings to become an AST after that. And then you pay like fees, like about $3,000. And then you have to renew that like every 3 years. There's no specific thing you have to do to renew it. You just have to give them money. They've tried to like build in some continuing education credits, like, oh, I went to the expo and attended a conference or whatever, but they have about 10,000. Wait, let me look. I was just looking this number up. Yeah, they have about 2,000 ASTs. So worldwide, that's 2,000 people giving out their certificates and teaching people. Another big thing about the SCA's education program is that they're just providing a basic curriculum that says these are all of the things that you have to teach, and that's it. So an AST could put a 5-slide PowerPoint together to teach that. They could not even do a presentation. They could have any level of education about educating other people. There are people in some countries that are just giving out the certificates, just pay to play. Like, you give me money, I give you the link to the test because you have to take an online written test. And then you get a certificate, like that easy.
So there's no like renewal process for the instructors. It's just a pay to play kind of deal.
Yeah, exactly. So, and there's so many instructors. And so, whereas CQI, so the other side of the fence, they have every 2 years a calibration for instructors, which is a tighter calibration. And then they put it into an event called Community of Practice, where you get together with, and there's only about 55 instructors for the Q program for CQI, so versus 2,000
in total. 55.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think maybe like 7 Robusta instructors. So very different numbers, so very different oversight. And so with CQI, we're coming together with the education department every 2 years and having discussions about the program, looking at changes that might be made, having at least some kind of voice in it. So very, very different organizations and sort of different goals. And CQI works, it's all over, but their project work is primarily in producing countries, whereas the SCA is primarily making their money in consuming countries.
Right. More
So
like end of supply chain.
Yeah, well, the events side of it anyway. Education that could be happening anywhere.
That's probably just where they make most of their money. So that's probably where most of their attention is focused on.
Yeah, it's about 50% of their income is their events, and then it looks like maybe about 35% is from education.
Okay.
And so whenever I teach a class, basically every person that's in my class is $100 to the SCA. Conversely, the CQI fees are a sliding scale, but for a Q course, it's like $420 per person to CQI, which is sort of cost prohibitive for origin work. It's a pretty big fee. So that's I know we'll probably talk about this later, but that's one change that this is going to have a positive effect on, probably, which is just that it's going to cost less.
Yeah, for sure.
So it'll be a little bit more accessible. There's already new Q instructors that didn't even have to do anything but press a button because the SCA made a new pathway for Q instructors. If you have completed the 2-day CVA for Cuppers course, and if you're a Sensory Pro AST, then you're automatically a Q instructor, which is like a bit of a slap in the face considering what the rest of us had to go through, the original 55 or so instructors.
Right. Is there any sort of exam or test process in now with this new form of acquiring your crew, or like this, what did they call it? The expedited way of getting your Q that's based off the SCA standards?
Yeah, if you have already completed your Q, as you have, and you take the 2-day SCA CVA for Cuppers course,
Yeah.
then you automatically will be a new Q grader for 3 years, and they're going to have some sort of process that they don't know. They have not established it, but they're going to have some sort of 3-year, like you have to come in and do something, or you have to go to some event, or I don't know. It's not going to be a calibration. Like, we're not going to be in a room cupping coffees together, from my understanding, but they don't know what it's going to be yet. So there's going to be some sort of calibration piece in there, or not calibration, renewal piece.
So it's just based off of attendance.
I think it's safe to say that, I think another piece of like a CQI instructor, to become a Q grader instructor for CQI, you had to have already been a Q grader for 3 years. You had to attend an observation of a Q course, along with have a Q instructor, 2 Q instructors, referral letters. And then after you observe, you have to at least co-teach 2 classes where you do some of the materials, and then finally have a final observation where one of like 5 or 6 people is allowed to come observe you teach and make sure that you do it well. And so that whole process, I mean, this is like $60,000 to $100,000 worth of time and paying for classes and travel. It's really not only such a huge investment, which is why it's such a big disappointment that they're doing this and how they did it. And they announced this to the instructors at the same time as they announced it to everybody else. So we didn't have any insight coming into the expo, which I actually canceled my ticket because I did not want to go see hundreds of people that were going to then ask me what was going on, where I had very little information to disseminate. So I didn't end up going to the Houston Expo, and I don't really imagine myself supporting that.
Right.
It's a really crappy place to be in, man. Like, I can't. I work in both sides of the systems. I do SCA classes. I did Q classes, and I can't just walk away from it because it's how I make all of my income, basically. So it's like, as much as I was so confounded and hurt and sick over this announcement, I can't walk away from them. It's like that Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I guess just based off of what you're saying, it would be safe to say that it's diluting the credibility of the Q grading system.
Yeah, I think it's just it's gonna be there will be people that do not have the level of skill or training, and then there will be people that do. All the Q graders that I know are probably going to take the CVA. I would definitely suggest taking the CVA for Cupper's course by the end of the year if you want to keep your license, because after that it'll be a 6-day course and a lot more money probably.
Yeah.
So
CQI's mission was always centered on giving smallholder farmers a way to compete on quality, not just price. I know we kind of talked about that a little bit already, but with this merger or buyout, I guess whatever you want to call it, how do coffee professionals ensure that it doesn't become a system that only benefits exporters, importers, or roasters?
yeah, I mean, this CVA coffee value assessment, it is based on sensory science. It has good founding research. And part of it is to show that there's value for things that we don't, maybe as Q graders, see the value in. And so in that way, it could actually be more beneficial. So what it does is it gives you a descriptive form, where you're just saying what's there. You're not saying is it good or bad. And then it gives you the affective form, which is the like how much you like it. But the way that they're talking about using this is like, as a coffee buyer, how much do you like it? So if you're like looking specifically for a Sumatran coffee and you have like 10 different samples on the table from a couple of importers, now when you're doing this evaluation, you're really putting that hat on of like, I'm shopping for a Sumatran coffee specifically with like these earthy notes and this heavy body. And even if you don't like it, like that's what you're doing. So you can use the effective form as just what you like as a person, and that's fine too. But in this way, I think like the most specific example I could give is like the Greek coffee that has the rheoid defect. It has a defect that's similar to phenolic. It tastes medicinal. It tastes chemical. It tastes like water out of a garden hose that's been sitting in the summer sun. But this is the flavor of coffee that people in Greece drink. This is something that they want. In most of the world, we would say, "Oh, that's a defect. We're not going to buy that." But there's value there because that's what the people there want to drink. So in this way, we would actually that coffee could end up getting a higher score if you were a Greek person buying that coffee from Greece, you know.
Mm.
And so in that way, we might see some differences, you know. It's very different. It's hard to even imagine how it's going to be integrated. But a lot of importers and exporters, I don't think are going to immediately jump over to that
Yeah.
system tomorrow. I think if they do adopt it, it'll be over the course of a couple of years. But then that said, both the Colombia Coffee Federation, and whatever the one in Brazil is called, basically, both just signed up to use this specifically for all their coffees.
Well,
So we have origin countries already adopting the CVA, and the two biggest, I mean, for Arabica anyway, those are, you know, they're producing together probably as much as the next 10 countries are producing. And I know, you know, CQI plans to continue their mission, and they can't continue their mission without quality evaluation. So they're going to have to either continue using the 2004 form, and still train people how to use that, or
mm.
most likely, and I think what I've heard on a couple of the meetings is that they'll be using the SCA CVA Q as an external partnership for training farmers and stuff.
Mm.
Um, I'd love to say that the decision was just specifically for the benefit of everybody, but at this point, it really looks financial. They're going to be getting like $750,000 a year from SCA for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
So about $7.5 million was what the Q program was worth to CQI.
Yeah, that seems pretty undervalued.
Yeah.
I know you were just talking about Greece and how they have like a preference and taste of coffee, and where most people, especially every Q grader, would consider that a defect in coffee. Do you think that there is a concern that changing the grading standards, and that it could create inconsistencies or confusion for buyers at the origin and just in consuming markets?
Yeah. Well, definitely there's going to be some confusion over the next year or two as
Yeah.
people are trying to adopt the changes, and see if this works, you know, see how it works. It's going to have to work. You know, Brazil and Colombia are doing it.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? Does that mean next week? I haven't really dove into like the plan there, but does that mean like next week all of the co-ops in Brazil and all of the exporters in Brazil are all of a sudden going to be using this new form? And the surprising thing is like the scores are not what you would think they would be. So it's going to be a new scoring language as well for us when we start to look at an acceptable specialty coffee is like a 70 maybe instead of an 80, and like you know, a really extraordinary coffee might all the way be up to all the way to like a 98 or something. Like from what I've seen so far, the scoring is much broader, much wider.
I'm not familiar with the SCA's grading standards. I know we had a client that reached out to us and mentioned if we knew anything about it, and I didn't, especially just because I came off the Q grading course that you taught. So I just didn't really have any interest in that. I'll attach a link in this discussion too when we post it, just so everyone can see. But cool, thanks for that.
That link is actually for the SCA's annual report, which kind of talks about the number of instructors and the amount of money and that kind of stuff.
Do you think it'll be the new grading model? Is it going to be emphasizing more objective data, or do you expect it to say rooted in subjective sensory evaluation?
It's different. You know, the like I said, there's two forms, and the descriptive form is now a check all that apply, or sometimes they call it a kata list. And so for every single attribute, say fragrance, you have basically all 9 of the inside of the flavor wheel descriptors, and then some of them have a couple more. Say like sweet has like brown sugar and maybe vanilla. Fruity might have like berry and citrus and one other. And then you also have an area to write it. But this kind of like training people to these attributes is really positive, because you can just really go to the grocery store and buy anything that represents each of these items. It doesn't have to be a flavor active or a lineated cafe. You can, like, if it's apple, you could really just go to the grocery store and buy an apple, for whatever, pick one off of a tree and have that reference for people and say, smell this, and do it blind so they can't see it, but, really smell it and understand what it is, so that when you're tasting this coffee that has an apple note in it, you can find that apple note in the coffee. And this is something that we would use like a lot in the Q, but using these expensive tools like the Linnaean stuff. So in that way, I think there will be another price reduction.
Yeah.
And also just a more accessible training for people. But then the other form, like I was saying, the effective form, which is liking form, it depends on how you're using it. Like I was saying, you could use it for what you like specifically. Like you as a coffee buyer for Maiden, like you're going to say, well, this is a Colombian coffee. We keep one Colombian coffee. Like, is this the one that we want? And that's going to be that's going to change your score, as opposed to if you were saying like, how much do I like this coffee? Do I want to drink this coffee every day? So it's this, depending on how you're using the form, it could definitely change. It's like I was saying with Greek, like you could actually be scoring this bad smell higher because of this specific desirability of the market.
Yeah.
And so you're buying for the market, that you're using the form for the market that you're in is going to have one score, versus you're using the form for what you like.
Right. So it's like basically like which hat you're wearing and how to separate the two when you're tasting coffees. And the CQI did a pretty good job at distinguishing the difference between the two and just understanding like the base fundamental knowledge of it all. And then the worry is, how do you do that with this new format?
Yeah, and I think you don't.
Yeah.
Kind of. I mean, I think that's what we're going to see a little bit of.
Yeah.
But that's like for informing your coffee buying decision, So it's not a universal calibration, which technically lots of people would argue that the Q wasn't either. That was one of the problems with it, because you did have different markets that wanted different things. Like a buyer for Folgers is like, oh, this is exactly what we need. It tastes like wet cardboard and Robusta, and it's really bitter. Like,
Yeah.
whatever. Like, but this new form could help them rate that higher. Like, you could end up with that coffee being an 85 or something, and it's like, yeah,
Yeah, it
it'll be
really just
interesting to see.
comes down to preference and the amount of people that are working for which company.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned before that the system was created in 2004, or was that the most recent update?
Yeah, that's the cupping form that we use now. It's
Okay.
from 2004.
What do you think this new version of the evolved Q needs to keep in order to stay relevant? And also, what do you think it needs to change?
Huh. Well, I think having it's just not going to be possible. The things that it needs to keep, it can't keep.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, like I was talking about, the level of oversight, instructor calibrations, communities of practice, these things that we were doing, I don't think that the SCA will enact the staff that they would need to manage, 2,000 plus instructors and pumping out 20,000 certificates a year, whatever it's going to be like. But that is what I would say that they need to keep,
Yeah.
some sort of consensus, some sort of annual practice or biannual or whatever, something to keep us speaking the same language. I guess it's a hard one. The best thing, like I said, about it is I think the financial piece is going to be more sustainable for people. I did notice, like I just said, during COVID, I had to pivot to online classes.
Yeah.
That's something that I don't think that CQI would have been very happy about, but there's a huge value in it. And for me being able to, like, send you all the materials you need, and you don't have to leave your house. You don't have to go to the other side of the country and stay in a hotel for 7 days, and just that level of stuff that might change with this new program. I'm not saying that the whole program is going to be, a 6-day program that you can do from home.
Hmm.
I'm pretty sure that that won't be the case, but I do think that there's a really good chance that the SCA will allow for at least 2 days of this program to be taught online, which would then reduce travel by 2 extra days, which is a lot.
Do you think this is like the beginning of the end of the Q, or are you still hopeful?
Oh yeah, I mean the Q is not the Q anymore.
Right.
It's over. It's done. It There is an organization called SCI, Sustainable Coffee Institute, that is led by some of the best instructors from the Q program, and I think, will fill this gap and they have a scoring that's very similar to the 2004 form. There's a good chance within the next few years that will fill in what's going to be missing from the world,
Yeah.
and the fact that the new Q grader program is not and doesn't do what the old one does, and it can't.
Hmm.
So it's going to go be its own thing. It's not an evolved Q. I think that lingo is really disrespectful for all of us who've been in this program and leading this program and taking care of all of these people going through this experience, for all this time. But it is something else. I wish they wouldn't even call it the Q and just say it's their new sensory evaluation or CVA program, and that's fine.
Yeah, they should at least give you guys like a severance package or something.
I laugh, but I mean, there's people that were coming through as assistant instructors that built labs to teach this, just to teach the Q,
Yeah.
and some people are losing their livelihood over this, which is, as I mentioned, confounding. It is confounding to me that this is happening because of the impact that it has on people and the lack of thought, care, and support from both organizations is just astounding. There's people who probably are having to fire a bunch of their staff right now. It was a big change, and it wasn't addressed in any way that was respectful for the people that it was affecting. It was more like, hey, look at what we're doing. We're evolving the Q. It's so cool. Look at all of our posters. Look at all of our flyers, and it's just tone deaf.
It seems like it didn't even really get the recognition it deserved, and I don't know if it's just like poor marketing on the SCA's part. And I don't know, it seemed like a huge move that didn't get that much attention, at least from what I see in the coffee world.
Yeah, I think everyone wrote a quick article about it over the weekend, and then that was it. And then
Right.
it's over.
So I guess is your hope that this model from you said the SCI, is your hope that that becomes like this new gold standard?
Yeah, I think so. I really trust and admire the people that are putting it together. I think they're only going to do things that will be beneficial and like I said, fill the gap of what we lost in this purchase.
I see that a lot of people are calling this a power grab. Do you feel the same, or what's your take on everyone's criticism? I could probably estimate what you're going to say just based off of our conversation, but just so we can summarize this all again.
Yeah, I guess absolutely. It's the SCA only had one sort of competitor in the coffee education certification market, and they just acquired them. And the reasoning behind CQI selling was not well communicated in all of the meetings that me and other instructors have attended. It sounded like they were afraid that with the new CVA form that the SCA was going to start cutting into their income, basically by offering a competitive certification, 6-day coffee taster certification. I don't I don't see how it's possible, but yeah, it's a monopoly. It's at this point, it's one ring to control them all.
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings reference. There's been some pretty good memes out there about it.
Right.
I just like have this vision of Mr. Burns like just tapping his fingers and so happy watching the number of people that applied for their, new evolved queue over the weekend. And I had to stop myself from doing it because I don't need it yet. There
Yeah.
will be a point where I have to apply for it and do need it, but I didn't want to be one of those numbers that they were just, yes, look at the fools, jump through the hoops.
Well, what do you think the founder of the CQI would do or is thinking in this
God,
situation?
well, I was trying to find some history because wasn't in the coffee scene back then when they were founded, but pretty much it seems like the same persons that founded the SCA also founded CQI.
Hmm.
And I think they're still alive today, so it'd be cool if they had some sort of a statement out.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I hope that it meets their original, goal, whatever that is. And I can say, like, as upset as I was in all of this, there's opportunities that also come along with it, whatever those might be. SCI emerging as a new and better sort of CQI for quality evaluation, or this CVA for Cupper's course. Basically, losing the Q was losing about $100,000 of income for me. So I just went from that to like realizing that, oh, there's this demand for the CVA class, which fortunately I am able to teach. And so putting that onto the books and having within 3 days, 24 people sign up, within 2 weeks, 40, 50 people sign up. Fortunately for me, that was like a really big opportunity. As much as I would also like to just wipe the slate clean and not work with these guys anymore, it's not possible in my life. So at least there was something that did sort of rise up and fill that gap for me.
I know it might be too early to tell, but are you thinking about moving over to the SCI? And
Oh yeah, they have my support 100%. And I don't know that there's about there's a very good chance that in July I will be working for a private company, so I won't be out here doing what I'm doing so much anymore. And so in that way, like, I'll try to steer whatever I can from there, but I will be happy to not rely on both of these organizations, which have definitely disappointed me more than once in the last since 2017 when the SCAA and the SCA merged. That was a rough one.
for Q graders like myself, what do you suggest for them moving forward? Do you think they should take these CVA classes to be recognized by these new SCA standards?
I think financially, partially it's going to depend on your finances personally. Like, if you can afford the time and the money to go jump on a CVA class, that's great. They're only going to allow that fast track through the end of the year. And then you'll have to take the 6-day class, whatever that is, when they release it. But there's other things, other considerations. So, when is your expiration? If you just recently completed your Q, or if you just recently or can calibrate before the end of the year, or before the end of September, you'll have that CQI Q license for 3 years. So maybe getting that and then waiting to see what happens, in 3 years. Maybe you have to take the 6-day course, but at least by then it'll be really well established. It'll be taught hundreds of times before then. I think that's if I was just a Q grader and not an instructor, that's probably what I would try to do. I would try to get my calibration. Now, however, if you're expiring more than 6 months out from September, then I would suggest going through the 2-day CVA class and having that for 3 years and seeing where we are then. I would even say like letting it lapse is fine if that makes sense for you. You know what I mean? Like, as a business owner, having that Q certification, it's probably nice for like talking to customers and getting, new customers on board. Oh, I gotta put that in my sell sheet. um, I didn't even think about that one when I was making my sell sheets. Yeah, as somebody like me, like, I was looking for some jobs. Like, if I didn't have a current certification, I wouldn't have been able to get this possible job that I'm looking at. So for that, for if you're in a stable place and you're not planning to go anywhere for 3 years, you probably don't need to worry about having your certification current. But if you are considering moving around in the industry and in a sensory role, it's probably a good idea to have some sort of current certification.
Hmm. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about? Like anything that I might have missed or wanted to touch on during this?
Hmm. I don't think so.
Even if you want to
Um,
like self-advertise, that's totally fine too.
like I said, I may be leaving in July, but we do have, I guess, the CVA course. We're offering it. I'll be offering it in Kansas City in like May. I think it's 24th and 25th. It's the Memorial Day weekend.
Hmm.
We have a few spots there. We're also offering twice at Royal New York in June, and then again in August. And then we have one in at Balzac Brothers in Charleston in September. And it's possible I'm going to put together an online option too. So if people are looking for that, they can reach out to me at t@collabops.com.
Hmm.
And also, people are more than welcome to reach out either through the community or via email with any questions or follow up thoughts that they have. I'm
Cool.
always happy to chat. We are offering one Q grader class next month. Also, it'll probably be my last Q that I teach. So if anyone's trying to get that education before it's gone, come and grab it.